It's a rainy 3 a.m. You're in a helium headspace. It's Monday, October 6th, 2025. The film The Departed came out today in 2006, directed by Martin Scorsese. It starred Matt Damon, Leonardo DiCaprio, Jack Nicholson, Martin Sheen, Ray Winston, Vera Farmiga, Anthony Anderson, Alec Baldwin, and Mark Wahlberg, who as Staff Sergeant Sean Dignam says, "I'm the guy who does his job. You must be the other guy." Adjusted for inflation, it made $44.2 million its opening weekend and has since accumulated $479.3 million. Today in 1923, Edwin Hubble, an unassuming former lawyer from Missouri turned astronomer, leaned over a photographic glass plate at Mount Wilson Observatory and marked three simple letters, VAR, with an exclamation point. It was shorthand for variable, and that small note beside a faint smudge of light in the Andromeda Nebula would expand humanity's conception of existence itself. Hubble had identified a Cepheid variable star, the kind whose brightness pulses in a predictable rhythm, allowing scientists to gauge distance. His calculation proved that Andromeda wasn't a cluster of stars within the Milky Way, but an entirely separate galaxy millions of light years away. The universe was far vaster than anyone had dared to imagine. Hubble, raised in small-town Missouri by a strict mother and a father who once forbade him from pursuing astronomy, found himself the reluctant face of a cosmic awakening. He lived through 2 world wars and bouts of personal obscurity before his name became synonymous with the scale of the universe itself. The night he wrote VAR may have seemed routine, but it almost literally cracked open eternity. Edwin Hubble, who once said, "We are just an advanced breed of monkeys on a minor planet of a very average star. But we can understand the universe. That makes us something very special." Today in 1889, back from a trip abroad, Thomas Edison stepped into his West Orange Lab's projecting room where his chief assistant, W.K.L. Dixon, ran a short experimental film. A figure on a tiny screen tipped his hat and reportedly greeted him, "Good morning, Mr. Edison. Glad to see you back." It wasn't commercial cinema yet. Edison's team was still groping toward mechanisms that would become the kinetograph and the peephole kinetoscope, and historians even debate whether the earliest trial films, like the lab-only Monkey Shines, belong to late 1889 or 1890. But that October 6th test marks a practical turning point. Images in sequence on flexible Eastman film made to move before a viewer, proof of concept for a new medium. Edison, who'd grown up hustling newspapers on trains, largely self-educated and partly deaf, the lab's incremental triumph that day was less a lightning bolt than another rung on a long ladder he and his muckers were building towards cinema. Thomas Edison, who once said, "When you have exhausted all possibilities, remember this: you haven't." Today, just 4 years later, a U.S. copyright entry is recorded for Edison Kinetoscopic Records, a clever legal maneuver to protect moving pictures by registering them as still photographs because film itself wasn't yet covered by law. The filing was made out of Edison's shop by his chief collaborator, W.K.L. Dixon, and modern scholarship has tied that first copyright entry to the short now known as The Blacksmith Shop, an early workmanlike spark of cinema's coming wildfire. Another film milestone today in 1927. In New York City, Warner Brothers rolled out The Jazz Singer, and for the first time, a feature film spoke back. Al Jolson's off-the-cuff patter broke the silence and made audiences feel the machine had found a human voice. Jolson, born Asa Jolson to a poor Lithuanian Jewish cantor and brought to the U.S. as a child, rose from immigrant scarcity to headliner wealth, yet his legacy is inseparable from the now-condemned blackface he used to sell songs and sentiment. The night itself was as fragile as it was historic. 15 film reels and 15 Vitaphone discs had to stay perfectly in step. A Rube Goldberg wedding of projector and turntable while the studio, near broke from its sound gamble, watched from the edge of the cliff. Sam Warner, the brother who had championed the system, had died the day before and couldn't see the doors he had kicked open. There's not much dialogue in the picture, barely a couple of minutes, but it didn't take much. Once a voice came out of that screen, every silent star, every theater, every studio knew the future had changed forever. Sound on disc would soon give way to optical sound, but that premiere made the talkies a fact the world could hear. Today in 1600, in a banquet hall of Florence's Palazzo Pitti, Jacopo Peri's Eurydice is performed for the wedding festivities of Maria de' Medici and Henry IV, a court entertainment that would become the earliest surviving opera, with Peri himself singing Orfeo. The piece was a tidy revolution, a new speech-like way of singing that let poetry steer the music, stitched to Ottavio Ranucci's libretto and accompanied by the discrete pulse of continuo instruments. His earlier Daphne had already tested the idea but is mostly lost. Eurydice is the one we can still put on a stand and read. Call it the proof of concept that let Monteverdi and everyone around him build a whole art form. Jacopo Peri, who once said, "Song in our time should show what song can do on stage." Today in 1889, the Moulin Rouge opened its crimson doors at the foot of Mount Martre, Paris, launching what would become the golden age of cabaret. Founded by entrepreneurs Joseph Aller, a gambler and inventor who once faced prosecution for his betting system, and Charles Ziedler, a showman with a taste for spectacle, it was a temple of light, laughter, and scandal where aristocrats and factory workers mingled under the same flickering lamps. The can-can's wild energy, the blur of feathers and champagne, and the haze of absinthe captured a Paris hungry to forget its struggles and to dance through them. The cabaret was mocked by moralists, shaken by fires and financial strain, but never stopped spinning its red windmill, symbol of a city's defiant joy and of art that refused to behave. Louise Weber, a can-can dancer of Moulin Rouge, once said, "I kick, I laugh, I live, because tomorrow, who knows if I'll dance again." Born today in 1742, Johann Hermann Wessel was a Danish-Norwegian poet and satirist whose sharp wit carved a lasting mark on Scandinavian letters. Living in an era that worshipped neoclassical ideals and moral seriousness, Wessel found his art in undermining them. His most famous work, Love Without Stockings, lampooned the overwrought structure of tragic drama by reducing it to the absurd realities of everyday life. A tailor's romantic misfortunes replacing kings and gods. Wessel's genius lay not in cruelty, but in clarity. He exposed the pretensions of high art without despising it. His humor was the kind that makes you wince before you laugh, a mirror held to our self-importance. In Copenhagen's literary circles, where poverty and wit often shared a bed, Wessel was both admired and pitied, a man of enormous talent who never quite found stability. Yet his refusal to bow to fashion gave him something rarer than fame, timelessness. Johann Hermann Wessel once said, "He who boasts of honesty tempts the world to test it." And those are some of the things that we humans have done over the years. Do the useful thing. Say the courageous thing. Contemplate the beautiful thing. That is enough. Please follow, like, and subscribe.